the meeting to order. We're a little bit late. I apologize for my late arrival. Until council selects its chair, I'll be chairing for the next 5 minutes. So I guess we'll call the meeting to order because we have a quorum. And I'd like to welcome all of our staff here. I don't maybe perhaps we do an introduction because we have a couple new employees. Ms. Armstrong has joined us as the city clerk, and Mr. McCray has joined us as the chief operations officer. So maybe if we did a round of introductions so that council and staff all know who's in the room, that would be quite helpful. And we also have a guest from the BICC. So we'll start at the back.
That's it.
My name is Cameron Strachan. I am employed as a Vancouver Island officer.
My name is Sonia Brenter. I'm the events manager at the Vancouver Island Conference Center.
Nancy Aiden Mackay, I'm a partner with KPMG.
Cameron Miller, detachment manager, and Island detachment for CMP.
Mike Dietrich, manager of police support services for the city.
Richard Hardy, Director of Parks and Recreation.
Gordon Boyd, manager of transportation engineer.
Doris Forney, manager of infrastructure planning.
Craig Richardson, I'm the fire chief.
Brad. Hi.
Dale Lindsay, Director of Community Development.
Philip Cooper, communication manager. John Van Horn, director of human resources.
Jamie Slater, senior accountant, accounting services.
Laura Mercer, manager of planning services.
Adam Veronica, senior financial analyst.
Deborah Duncan, deputy director of financial services.
Wendy Fuller, business and asset planning.
Denise taken general manager for the day at Brown Conference Center.
Ian? Jane. I think it's Jane next.
Yes, Jane Arp, sorry. Jane Arp, I'm the city clerk.
Mary Brown, legislative services.
Victor Mima, chief financial officer.
Jerry Hong, Councilor.
Bill Yoakum, council.
Gordon Fuller, council. Tony Dunn.
Ian Thorpe, counselor.
Jim Kipp, sorry I'm late.
Bill McKay, mayor.
Thank you. Is there any late items for the agenda?
No late items.
Okay. Can I have a motion to adopt the agenda? Yoakum and McKay. Any discussion? Question? All those in favor? The next item on the agenda is selecting a chair and vice chair for the Finance and Audit Committee. This committee will probably have a heavy agenda workload because a number of the financial policy recommendations from the Core Services Review will be going through this committee. It's really an opportunity for council as a whole to sit down in SARC and work closely with staff and its stakeholders and make decisions about financial management and financial practices for the city. A high focus on accountability and forward planning. So those of you that wish to step forward and lead that committee need to be able to make that time commitment for the Finance and Audit Committee and provide that leadership. Councillor Fuller?
That lets me out. I'm off the hook on this one.
Councillor Kidd?
Who would like to step forward?
Would you?
I have some questions. I'm not specific to stepping forward or not, but I just have some questions as it relates to the committee.
Sure. Councillor Russell?
Well, I wasn't,
Okay.
who started the core review?
9-0.
So, Mr. Memo can answer any questions about the mandate and functioning of the committee.
I mean, the frequency of the meeting load. So recognizing that we're in some significant decision-making processes right now, do you sense that the Finance Committee workload will be lighter in 2017 or heavier, because there's a considerable amount of heavy lifting that needs to be done, obviously. And I'm just wondering about when are the meetings proposed to be held, frequency of the meetings, and so on. And will everybody's attendance be required at all of the meetings?
So I'll answer two questions and then leave the other half, which is the attendance piece. The first one, 2017 is going to be an anomaly in terms of workload because, as you appreciate, you have some heavy lifting to do. So let me start off with the typical year for us. So we would expect that the Finance and Audit Committee would meet every month from October through December, so we can get the budget squared away. And then you would have 2 meetings in Q1 of each year, because you have to deal with the property tax bylaw and also deal with the financial audit. You have one meeting in summer, just to deal with our mid-year reporting. So that's kind of like a typical year. And so you're heavy in Q4 of every year, so you can get the budget done. You taper off in Q1 just to get the year finished, deal with the audit, and deal with the property tax bylaw. And then 1 meeting in summer to deal with your mid-year financial update. So that's kind of like a typical year. Next year, you might end up with probably some workshops in terms of dealing with policy proposals that will be coming your way. We're still working out how that's going to be stretched out. So I don't expect that you will meet every month, but at least probably once a quarter. There's an expectation. On an attendance perspective, obviously for this to work, I'm biased a little bit because I believe that finance is the most important aspect of the oversight. So your attendance would actually enhance that oversight.
You're right, though, it is more.
If I could have a follow-up, please. Thank you for the days and times. So would this be a consistent Tuesday morning? And the only reason that I ask because this is an important role, the chair and the vice chair. This is an important committee. Obviously, I don't disagree with you at all. I have often said that our budget is the most important document that we have. Some will disagree. Say it's the community plan and this and that. I think it's actually our financial plan. And knowing that respect the other committees that we're on and all those other things that people have heavy workloads. So it's Tuesday mornings, and it's going to be 10 o'clock on Tuesday mornings.
We can lock it in if that's the preference of the committee, but we have to balance that with the other committees as you speak.
Should be like a simultaneous cancel.
So
I'm just trying to get a handle on it because I have an interest, but I just want to make sure that I don't commit to something that I'm not able to fill responsibly.
So the indication is that we can lock it in at Tuesday mornings, whenever that schedule comes out.
Thank you very much.
Councilor Kett?
I'd like to recommend that Councillor Bestwick be appointed the chair. I make that motion. And then to bring a secondary motion in, that the vice chair would be the acting mayor during that period of time, so that the chair would be consistent. We can rotate the chair in a year or so, but the chair is there. But the person who's being the acting mayor during that time would take the role of the vice chair, keep a continuation amongst councillors and that, and not 2 people overloaded with a very intrinsic system. So I think that might be an alternative from my view. So I'd like to see if Councillor Bestwick would step forward, because I nominate him to be the chair.
Second that.
Moved by Kett, seconded by Yocum.
All those in favor?
Thank you, sir. So just a question that I would have, we'll be able to establish the Tuesdays. My preference, if that were the case for those of us that are on the RDN, that the Tuesday not be the Tuesday of the RDN meeting.
Okay.
They'd be on the alternating Tuesdays, coming back after a Monday night meeting, in and of itself is for everybody. It's not just us. It's going to be challenging in itself. So if there was opportunity to schedule them on non-RDN days, it would be a preference, and if that's possible, then I would. And I'll do it for 1 year.
So you have to come to that.
I would not want to lock myself into this right up until November of 2018.
So then,
I'll do it for 1 year on the
Council Fuller?
Is there any way we can do it to start it at 9:30 instead of 10?
I'll be late.
Well, that's,
Later.
we do a meal at my other job, and the employee I have is a 21-year-old girl. She's really good, she's learning. But if there's an incident with 20 or 30 people having lunch, I need someone else there. And I can't always trust the other person there will be empathetic with what goes on with people that I work with.
Are the rest of you okay with 9:30? Start.
So I have a motion.
I seconded it.
So Councillor Bestwick for 1 year, Tuesdays, alternating with RDN starting at 9:30.
And the acting mayor piece was part of it.
And the acting mayor, do you want to add that to the
Well,
motion?
I'd like to add that.
There was a motion as far as I know.
I think it works for me.
I seconded it.
Discussion?
Question.
Question? All those in favor?
Getting involved in bold.
Unanimous.
Yeah.
So,
I don't need to these are just the questions.
For agenda item number 5, I'll step aside after this one. Are there any questions on the terms of reference for finance and audit committee? That's attached to your agenda's page 2, your worship.
Okay, I reviewed the terms of reference and concur with them as printed. There's one question I have, and that is, with respect to community and investment matters, it's to receive, review funding applications from community organizations and recommend grant fund awards. So it talks about grant funding, it talks about statutory tax exemptions and permissive tax exemptions. Does it also include licenses? In other words, non-market rent to organizations. Would those also be reviewed by this committee?
Like leases and contracts.
Right. Boys and Girls Club, community center leases.
Yeah, we would have to determine that, but that could be that's a good fit for this committee.
And I just point out that I think Richard Harding is also doing a review of the leases and rental agreements. They're approaching a policy to that. That's from the CSR.
That's correct.
Yeah. So we still have some decision points, and obviously that would be a finance policy that you could consider here. You may ultimately decide other bodies deal with that, but this would be the table where you could consider and discuss it.
Well, I consider, if I could, I consider that the permissive tax exemptions, statutory tax exemptions, grants, and licenses, non-market licenses all contribute to our social contribution, so I thought it was a natural fit.
Thank you. Councillor Bestwick?
I think Dr. Fuller was up.
Okay, Councillor Fuller.
Okay. The whole permissive tax exemptions, renting city properties, all that crud. I chair the 710 Club, which actually rents a city property. It doesn't ask for any leeway on rent in a few years because we're doing okay. But it comes up every 3 years for the permissive tax exemption. Now online, people are starting to say that I should not even be voting for it any time it comes up during the period that permissive tax exemptions are online. I'm of the opinion that when 710 Club comes up, yes, I step aside. But as it is a 3-year tax exemption, when the general bylaw comes up the next year and you're adding a couple others, there's no reason for these things.
So I can't opine on that. I can generally state that a perceived conflict of interest isn't an actual conflict of interest. But you do have $3,000 set aside to get that legal opinion, and I would urge you to use those funds so that you can address this straight on. And you'll be able to articulate very clearly what your role is on this committee and any other decision-making body.
And
It's there to support
it
you.
really sucks to have to waste $3,000 for
Shouldn't.
something I had randomly talked to a couple lawyers about. Who says, yeah, no conflict.
Well, Councillor Foley, you could probably get it for under an hour's worth of work, which would be $250.
There you
so-
go. I'll give it a shot. Maybe I'll even pay for
I'm not a lawyer, but not involved.
it. Well,
Councillor,
if I was, Wendy would be every time too, so you'd have two people that wouldn't be able to sit. So, thanks, I'll actually go ahead and do that,
okay,
just to get it out of the way.
that's a good idea.
And I'll pay for it.
Councillor Bestwick?
Thank you. The terms of reference, this will be fluid, so subject to amending and reviewing and renewing and so on and so forth as things come up about non-market rate and licenses and information coming from other committees on fees. Parks and Rec will be delivering us what their recommendations will be, et cetera. So will that be something that this committee would just simply ask to be placed on the agenda? If there's, thanks.
Councillor Kitt?
On the enterprise risk management, a description of enterprise risk management is interesting to me. Could you give me an explanation of what that means?
So what it means traditionally, what happens is people look at risk management from a silo perspective when there are dependencies across the organizations. Something that happens in public works, we may not think it affects finance, it does, because I have to pay at the end of the day. So we're taking in kind of like an entire organization's view on risk management and looking at.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. It's hugely important to me. And business continuity, we do not have currently a business continuity plan, do we?
So we're working on that. We have MNP will be coming to meet with this committee to kick off the project. So that's a process that's evolving as we speak.
Well, it was started in 2001, so it's good to see it's going.
Councillor Yocum?
Thank you. Bill's good. Before I ask my question, do you think we can turn the heat up in here? Hey, I'm kidding, it's not sarcasm. Page 4, on the membership, non-voting under membership, second bullet, non-voting advisory members as required, eligibility, broad business experience, example, member, chamber of commerce, etc. Won't they be in a sort of piggyback and forwards? Wouldn't that be a blatant conflict?
Not necessarily. We just wanted to, you may wish to expand your membership of this committee, but I think probably the route we will go is to invite experts to come and talk to you about different areas and share their expertise to facilitate decision making. They don't necessarily need to sit on this committee. We just wanted to have some consistency in how we were drafting the terms of reference across all of the committees, so we included that here. It gives you that flexibility if you ever thought you wanted to add accountants or something to this.
So the follow-up, please, is I think that bullet's probably misleading, and if we really can keep it council and the experts and the staff and whatnot, because I can just see the bloggers and the stuff out there going out there is thinking council isn't fulfilling that bullet. They put it out there and not going to take applications, and so it's sort of be very misleading. If there's not an interest, I don't have an interest on it because I think there's enough wisdom in the room and experts like you stated, and so.
So when this goes back to council for final approval, we'll adjust membership eligibility.
That's just my opinion.
Yeah. Because there's one school of thought that's still out there. This is working as a select committee on an annual basis, but you could create this as a standing committee and delegate council decision-making powers to it. That's going a little bit too quick right away, but it's something that may go to in the future.
Because this is totally final. I can just see some members of this table totally politicizing it and having to line up down Nichols Street to get on this committee just to do what they do.
Not in front of my house.
Okay, anyways, thanks.
Councillor Thorpe?
Thank you. Page 4 under term, it says members may serve, and we're talking about members at large, I think members may serve a maximum of 2 cumulative terms. Do we mean consecutive terms?
That's a typo we've caught review of the.
Right, thanks.
Councilor Fuller?
And, sorry, I'm kind of the term is what, 4 years? 1 year?
We didn't specify a term to the appointment to the Finance and Audit Committee for council members.
Okay, so we're talking about other members.
If you ever choose to go down that path.
Okay, good, because I like that. Yeah.
Councilor Bestwick?
Yes, please, thank you. Mr. Mima, under enterprise and community investment matters, and maybe, I'm just wondering, where would our investment portfolio fit into the headings?
It would fit under financial matters. If we didn't specify that it's under policies and procedures, that's where it would fall under, and it will always come through this committee anyways.
Because we have had that conversation with the council previously about our investment situations. That's something that this committee would
We'll deal with it.
and it would fall under the
Financial matters.
Okay, if there's no further questions on the terms of reference, I would like to turn the chair over to the new chair, Councillor Bestwick, and it will go item number 6.
Well, thank you. And we don't need to do anything as it relates to the terms of reference other than just
Receive them? Receive them?
I think you can receive
so
it.
motion to receive the terms of reference as presented.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Pitt, seconded by Councillor Hall. Or
It doesn't matter.
all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Who's doing the? Jane, are you taking all the?
Yeah, we're taking it.
Okay, thank you. Next on the docket is presentations, of which there are 2. And KPMG LLP to present the 2016 external audit plan.
That's it. So while Nancy comes up, she's not a stranger to council. I think you've met with her. She'll present from over there. You may recall that a couple of meetings back, council appointed KPMG as our auditor. And part of the process is the auditor to engage with the Finance and Audit Committee to share what the audit plan looks like. And that's what she's doing today as information.
Thank you. Well, thank you for the opportunity to be here and commend you on having an audit finance committee. I think it's a good governance practice for sure. And really the purpose today is to let you know what our plan is for the audit. And in case you have any input or any areas you would like us to focus on that we're not covering here that has an impact on the financial statements at the end of the day, today is the day to share that with us. We will, I'll present this information today and then we will come back to you at the conclusion of the audit in the April timeframe, depending on how the meetings fall. So I'll report back on how the audit went. This was in your package, so I'll just go over kind of the executive summary and go into the information, but it is all in the material that you would have received. Our team is consistent with what we've had for the previous years, so I've been involved with the audit for the past 5 years. I have a concurring partner, so he reviews the material as well as an independent viewpoint. We have a management and good continuity throughout the rest of our team as well. One of the things that we've focused on, that we've outlined, are some main approaches. Financial reporting is obviously a big one. Make sure that financial statements comply with all of the accounting rules and regulations. We also take a look at IT systems. So in case there was a new system implemented, we take a look at access controls as well. That's pretty standard. Revenue recognition is a big one. So we take a look at the tax rates and what's being charged to the community and making sure those are being calculated correctly. We also take a look at capital assets, making sure that any large purchases are appropriately approved and that any assets that are not in use and should be impaired are recognized accordingly. We also take a look at payroll, given that it's a large component, and we look at non-routine contracts as well within the payroll category. And one of the things that within our standards is we're required to presume that there is an opportunity for management to override the financial statements, just given the structure. So to combat that, we take a look at journal entries that are posted near year end. We also take a look at abnormal journal entries that are posted on weekends or late in the evenings, and we focus in on the key areas where there would be any opportunity to perhaps balance the budget or the results one way or the other. And that's not specific to the city, that's just part of our standards and we're required to do. Materiality, what we do is we take a look at the financial statements and calculate a number that we feel if there was accumulation of errors that met that number, it would be distorted to the users of the financial statements. So we have a parameter guideline that we use, and that's 0.5% to 3% of total expenses. So for Nanaimo, we've calculated that out at 3.5 million, which is 2.1%, so well within the realm. And for that, what we do is, at the end of the day, we find some differences and we add them up. If they add up to a number of 3.5 million or greater, we wouldn't be able to sign a clean audit opinion. So that's kind of the bucket that we use to accumulate any differences if we do find. We will also report back to you any differences we find that are greater than $175,000. So you'll see anything within that parameter. And any differences between reclassifications, so between an asset account or a balance account, that's $700,000. So there's a bigger tolerance when it's just a difference between the categories on the financial statements versus an impact that would actually have on the statement of operations. And I do need to inquire as well that there's nothing that you are concerned about as a council with respect to any irregular activities that you've seen happening during the year. I wouldn't assume so, but I'm required to ask that, so thank you. We are independent. We're required to be independent. We have a whole list of procedures that we do to make sure that we're independent and just reporting back to who we are. And within the material too, we have a list of current developments. Those are changes that are coming to the accounting standards to make sure that you are aware of them. Generally speaking, that's not an item of high focus for most councils. And I can tell you that there's nothing that would change during this fiscal year or the next fiscal year. It wouldn't be until 2018 we can see any accounting changes. And I'll make sure that I will keep you updated on those as well. That's sort of our focus of the audit in a nutshell. I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Have you reviewed our core services review that was just completed?
Not in any detail. I've seen the report, but I haven't delved into any indications that we have.
Okay, and the benchmark of over 170K that you mentioned, or 3-point-something million that you look for, what was it again on the 170K, that if you see a discrepancy over that amount, you'll report it? Or?
Yeah, so any difference that we come across while we're doing our testing, that's $175,000 or greater, I will include that in a report back to you in April.
So why under 170 not looked at? That's still a substantial amount of money in my view, even in a $200 or $100 million budget plus RDN. Why? Who set that standard?
It's within the accounting guidelines, and it's 5% of our material number. So it's a calculated number, and it's really based on obviously we could chase everything down to the penny, but we would be here 365 days a year, so it's
I'm here 365.
I don't think you want to pay me.
No. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? A motion to receive the presentations. Moved by Councilor Thorpe, seconded by Councilor Ford. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next presentation is Ms. Denise Pont, General Manager of Bank from the Conference Center, regarding the 2017 financial requirements for the Bank Brown Center.
Thank you. This morning's presentation, I will be reviewing questions, we hold them to the end. Appreciate that. So this morning, we will be looking at a brief overview of who we are in relation to the city. I will cover off some of the sales requirements and booking windows and the booking policies and procedures document. It was drafted prior to opening and agreed to by both the city and hoteliers. I will then move into financials and discuss delegate days, participant days, and room nights thereafter. Some findings and observations of the feasibility study and the core review, and a quick overview of our sales initiatives for 2017. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. Atlantic Hotels is 55 years old next year. The parent organization is Ocean Properties, and between the two, we operate and manage over 134 hotels in North America. Atlantic Hotels has won a number of prestigious awards, both at the corporate level and many individual properties that it operates. This was one of the reasons that the City of Nanaimo had confidence in our organization to open the VICC, manage its operations, and develop its standards of service. In the agreement between the City and Atlantic, the hotel contract states that the management company is to market, manage, control, and operate the conference center, having the exclusive authority and responsibility for the day-to-day management of the conference center. As you can see, the business model was designed to enable a number of support systems to facilitate this endeavor. The VICC team reports to both the city and Atlantic Hotels, which facilitates support in accounting, sales, e-commerce, and purchasing. And volume buys in the industry enable the best pricing on many operational requirements. The service deliverables, food, beverage, AB, housekeeping, banquet setup, report to the VICC management team, and where applicable are responsible for their own bottom line. In the previous slide, now the former slide, you'll note that there was a clause in the management agreement that binds the sales team to certain selling windows. It's the booking policies and procedures document, which was approved by the city, endorsed by the hoteliers in 2007. As you can see, conferences of varied sizes have different windows as to when they can be confirmed as definite. 200 plus delegates can confirm any time. Mid-size 199 less, 18 months, and less than 99 confirmed 12 months out. Trade shows and consumer shows are between 12 and 18 months, depending on the month. And the single-day events, depending on guest room volume, can book between 6 to 3 months. These are designed to yield the sales process for single-day events to ensure that conferences have first priority booking the center. Clients that are affected by those are looking to book weddings, banquets in the conference season, which runs mid-January through to June and September through to November. Nonetheless, they have been in place since opening and adhered to by the VICC team. So that's just a quick intro to understand the parameters between the organizations. So we'll start with the numbers, the financials. Revenues, overall, we're looking to increase revenues by 6%, although they do vary per deliverable. Space is going up 9% due to the increased demand in the meeting market. Because of this, food is going up 5.6%, and beverage is up 3.7%. These increases affect our other revenues, as you see there, and they're directly dependent on the sales from the three mentioned streams. And we are showing the increase of a total of 4.1% here. These numbers are reflective of business on the books, the anticipated growth percentage and pace compared to 2016's results. Expenses. They're fluctuating for 2017. There's a 1.8% increase in room rental, and that's room rental costs over 2016. That's due to the higher revenues. Food and beverage, for the same reason, has a 4% increased food and beverage cost. We obtain a 17% commission structure on food and beverage. Food at the first 800,000. Thereafter, it's 20%. Beverage on the first 250,000, and it is 18.5% thereafter. There's also an overall 5.3 decrease in the cost of A&E and other revenues, as labor is not factored and applied in budget for each event varies, and the technological demands requirement for manpower varies, and for setup. So for reference, we receive 32% commission on audiovisual sales and 15% on trade shows. Administration is going up, limited, very minimal, at 1%, and that's just slight fluctuations in security costs. And we were able to negotiate a lower contract rate with Charter, our solution provider for our custom-built network system. Sales and marketing is increasing 27.5%, and that's due to the hiring of a new sales manager. As well, we've put additional funding in for photography, as it's time to actually create new visuals in collateral and future marketing. We've also added dollars towards a website upgrade and mobile-friendly revamp of that website. Utilities are increasing overall 11.2%. And in properties and ops, we're seeing a reduction by 3% due to one staff member moving to part-time, and some additional purchases from 2016, and the need to implement emergency backup lighting in service areas will not be anticipated in 2017. So the bottom line is with the additional revenue of $105,000 and the associated costs to those revenue streams, the expenses exceed marginally over this year's results, and we anticipate the deficit just over $5,000 for 2017 compared to 2016. We'll move on to other numbers. I threw this slide up to give an understanding that conference centers apply, how they manage their calculations for dealing with non-resident delegates and their days versus room nights. So for every night, there are 2 delegate days, whether it's a travel day the day before, or the day after the conference, or a single day conference. Often the guests will arrive for the night prior to maybe a reception, stay for the day, of course, and the evening, and they just want to settle in before the banquet that evening. In either case, in many cases, there's too many to list, a delegate day represents a day either side of the room night. So delegate days, however, for the sake of conservative, the BICC counts only one day of the conference. We do this because we cannot guarantee or verify that 2 full days will qualify on either side of the room night. So we err on the side of caution to give more accuracy than assumption. Participant days, just for clarity, I added this slide to touch on participant days. They are not a calculation that is used for reporting other than how many people came through the building and in 1 year. Delegate days are actually extrapolated out of participant days, and they're nowhere reflective of published numbers that affect economic impact. So now we'll talk about pace for those days. In September of last year, we were pacing at 19,000 delegate days, and this year that will result in 29 to 30% growth increase for 2016. This based on conference actualization and the tracking of non-conference rooms that come from our group visits. I've provided you a copy, a list of titled non-conference rooms within the materials. It should be noted that this information is from clients willing to provide that information. Using the same calculation for 2017, we anticipate that from this year's pace of 2017, the growth in the year from here will merit a similar percentage and actualize at 20,000 delegate days. This reflects an 18% decrease over 2016, but will generate, and these days will still generate 6 million economic impact. Here we see Victoria is in the competitive set. It's down 9.6%, as we are, down 18%. Prince George is up 23 and Penticton is up 28. This is a clear example of conferences moving in a rotational fashion and pattern, and based on the 2017. While pace in the conference market is down 18%, thankfully the meetings market has gained strong momentum, and group business from the corporate sector carries us above last year's revenues. This pace can be validated based on the loyalty and retention that VICC has built amongst its clientele base. In our corporate business groups, such as we have a number of them, Coastal Community Credit Union, BC Ferries, which generate hundreds of room nights over the course of the year. Department of Fisheries and Oceans, which have guaranteed room blocks at local properties that may not be understood to be part of conference business. Scotiabank, they have guaranteed blocks at local hotels that is not understood as conference business. Laird Homes, WorkSafe BC, Ford Motor Company, I can go on for those. But there are a few of our regular accounts that frequent the VICC, and in some cases monthly, in other cases bi-monthly. Proms and ceremonies for the public and private school system are also repeat clients, even when a new PAC committee is formed year after year. Dover Bay, Ladysmith, Cedar, NDSS, VIU, Wellington just joined us for 2017. And it goes on from there. Annual Christmas parties, Quality Foods, Ramsey Lightman Roads, Island Pursuit of Dental Excellence, Thrifty Foods, Country Grocer, MNP, Real Estate Webmasters. We have a number of those as well. So some of these since opening. Weddings on average, 5 to 8 a year, and they're willing to book tentatively until the booking policy guidelines, booking window permits them to use a facility and we issue a contract. And conferences. Some of the conferences are multi-day events that the ICC has booked year after year. They would be things like Edgewood, Harbor Authority, 3 years in a row, Real Estate Webmasters, 4 years in a row, Rural Doctors, 2 years in a row, Canadian Q Sport Association, 2 years in a row, VIRED Conference and Trade Show, 6 years in a row, McFarland Safety Conference, 6 years in a row, VIBA, 6 years in a row. And so these are just as a point to discuss the type of loyalty that we have generated and accumulated since we opened the facility. Regardless of the booking windows for the VICC, we have created a strong loyalty and retention base of clients. So it's really about what matters most. In the booking policies and procedures guidelines, VICC cannot discount on published prices that cover goods and services unless it is being sponsored for promotional purposes or securing new business with the intent of attracting conferences and or multi-day events. With the amount of interest we generate in day meetings and single-day events such as weddings, galas, proms, you can see that some of these selling guidelines prevent strategy exploration in a reduced pricing for need periods, such as July and August. Such an opportunity would potentially incite more activity and aid in further revenue generation and help to reduce the deficit. However, this would be a huge competition locally and would certainly garner pushback. And ultimately, it would be contradictory to the objective and the mandate of the sector. So while this is not an option, we do our best to facilitate both elements, annual deficit and economic impact on a daily basis. RFPs, or requests for proposals, they're derivative of 2 methods of inquiry. The client is seeking them from us. They have initiated the request, sent it to us and other facilities locally or other centers elsewhere. And 2, or we have actively sought the business, courted it, and negotiated this conference to fit their facility, to fit our facility. As you can see, the client, no matter the source, actively seeks us to obtain quote information concerning a guest room block with rates. We then obtain those, submit on their behalf, and the client agrees to bring the conference. The client speaks to those accommodation properties directly for their own bedroom block booking contracts. And you'll also note that it's the hotels are expected to send us a copy of those contracts to submit to our master file. To date, we haven't received those copies, so we're not clear on what kind of volume our groups are specifically generating at hotels without it. We send RFPs out to hotels under 2 different directives: client preference for hotel product and client need and bedroom inventory demand. In some cases, they are both applicable. So I provide you with a snapshot view of the RFPs, who we send them to, and who responded according to our booking system. That's also the materials that are handed out. It's the longer one. The legal side starts. So in the feasibility study that was put forth from CBRE, it's spoke of 14,000 room nights generated by the VLCC. At a recent council meeting held September 19th, a few hoteliers voiced confusion and questioned CBRE's findings. Lost their acronym there. It was stated that the Coast Hotel would only account for 2,000 room nights from the 14,000 that were realized. And the Coast would be correct.
They were correct.
They were correct. The Coast will give us a standard room block of 100 rooms per RFP, and that they've received. And some clients have already worked directly with the hotels and prefer to secure their own rooms outside of the services. Given we had 21 conferences or multi-day events, the Coast calculations are accurate. So where are they going if they're not staying in the 9 hotels, or as per the hotels that do track the business, and or if the question is asked upon them at check-in at the front desk? As you can see, there's a number of groups we have that aren't actually conference delegates, but overnight stays. So rather than suggested that the esteemed CBRE was inaccurate in their findings, I think it's prudent as a business community to magnify the results and look for answers. I did a research inquiry online as to what else is available in the region, and I chose dates I remember for this week because they're for my birthday, and I've chosen 1 guest, 1 room, and hopefully that's not the case. But today we live in a shared economy, and the average person is both business and leisure travel savvy. They may have a per diem on expenses to attend an event, or costs come directly out of their own pocket. They may prefer a brand that they are loyal to, or that is not, and that loyalty that is not available in our community, or they may be part of a loyalty program in a brand that is not available as well. Any one of those factors will initiate online searches if options are limited. When I travel, unless I have a sister property in that community to get the best rate, I will actually do the research and find it out of a hotel facility that is to my liking and or price point. Everyone is their own travel agent today. And it's important to strategize around this. It's really about the best deal, whether it's appealing rates that are offered. Guests are incentivized with breakfast, shuttle, cocktail hour tapas, because the shared economy is here to stay. As you can see, Airbnb, we have over 253 rentals that showed up on the 28th. If you look on a different day, different numbers show up. Some are entire homes, 112 of them, some of them private rooms, 138, still larger than any hotel that we have currently in the community. Booking.com, 45, of course, hotels, 105. When drill down to Nanaimo, you still get a number of properties that do include Parksville. So for the non-resident delegate, the travel is not an issue. So it's important to remember that the conferences did in fact book, whether they had established rooms with our processes or their own. This data is in our system. They came, they were served each day, and they were booked for. They were charged per person, invoiced, and they were paid, and they paid for those charges. They did not dispute the numbers in their invoices, or they were mirrored in their own registration folios. There are also a few other performance measures and concepts that we need to speak to from the feasibility study. In 2014, revenue was down $214,000, which would move the price per square foot to a higher than average price in comparable venues. Conference business was down 30% in food and AV and 15% in space rental. We installed $10,000 worth of lighting, LED solution to majority of the facility, and security was up for $11,000 for a number of reasons, including issues at council that year. Credit card commissions were high, well over $6,000 and from the year previous, and $60,000 was spent on union negotiations, bargaining, and a CBA agreement, which did not affect the overall expenses for wages, as negotiations outcome from this was similar. Talk about rates. When compared to other tier 3 centers in BC, the VICC's rental rates tend to be higher, about 5 cents per square foot. And since opening, the VICC has positioned itself to compete for business based on the quality of the facility, its connected and consistent technology offerings, and all other services that fulfill the expectation of satisfaction and access for those on the events. And in summary, CBRE validates this positioning in their summary. More importantly, price has not been a deterrent for conference delegates, and the meeting market segment is growing nonetheless. Lost business. Lost business applies to 2 factors only. The lost group was insistent on a hotel that was attached to the facility and wanted to take the elevator home for their executives. A client felt, and the other factors, the client felt there was not enough of a grade option for their hotel preference. For clarification, lost business or lost group rooms did not infer to groups that had conflict in booking inventory, but rather had preference as such that prevented them from choosing our destination and the bedroom inventory in Nanaimo. The feasibility study also pointed out that given Nanaimo's current hotel room inventory and meeting space capacity, the city is largely restricted to hosting groups of less than 250 attendees in size from a functional capacity perspective. It is this statement alone that poses the question, are we not in competition with local operators in the first place? I suggest that we may be, and that this in itself is a further discussion, as it may suggest a new lens and revisiting the booking policies and procedures in their current form, until such time that a new hotel property is built. So the takeaway, one of the glaring takeaways from the feasibility study is there is no collaborative marketing plan with Tourism Nanaimo, ourselves, and the hotels. And the core review put forth a recommendation that clearly outlines the next step in addressing this issue for both the city of Nanaimo and its investment with the VICC. I know that I speak for my team when I say that we very much look forward to this and to such an opportunity and the next step in the story and narrative of the VICC. So just until such time, we'll continue to market the facility with new photography next year, building new collateral for destination appeal, continued presence in 3 island-based wedding guides, Meeting Places BC, insertions in the Nanaimo magazine, coverage at In-Flight magazine, insertions in various business magazines, MPI Global Web listing, and so on. We have a number of different things that we're doing We will continue to do our face-to-face calls and sales, fixed rates for multi-bookings for conferences, which we do have, and continue with nonprofit rates for 330 guests or more. We'll continue to offer space, lobby space for ballroom bookings and so forth with our conferences, and value adds with various services. For community awareness, we will continue with our partnerships with the Chamber, their Business Expo, the DMBA Santa's workshop annually, the Tourism Leadership Environment, the Nanaimo Arts Council agreement showcasing local art, community involvement with the arts, Prince Dance, Bridge Festival, and bring back the second annual Kids Conference this coming January. And of course, we're in a number of advertising publications and memberships. And yeah, thank you.
Is there any questions? I have Mayor McKay, Ian Thorpe, Billy Open to start.
Thank you. I have a number of questions. I'll just ask a couple to start. You talked about priorities. So if you have a single day event such as a convocation, would they be able to book and bump a 3-day multi-day conference? Okay.
A 3 or 4 day multi-day conference would be able to book and bump them.
Okay. Second is, what are the City of Nanaimo billings?
I'm sorry?
What do you bill the City of Nanaimo?
In terms of,
All of our meetings
oh, I see.
and the food and so on and so forth.
We charge you the fixed rate for that space.
No, what's the annual dollar amount?
The annual dollar, I would have to look at it, but I suggest it's probably somewhere, because you have so many different meetings. You have the committee of the whole, you have council, you have public hearings. They all run at about $1,000 per day, per evening. So if you have multiple events, they can go anywhere from 36 to 45,000 in space.
36, 45? Great, thank you. Sure.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you, Denise, first of all, for your presentation. I really appreciate getting the information, and it's something I look forward to examining more closely. But a couple of things sort of stuck with me as you spoke, and one was early on in your presentation when you talked about comparing different cities and their booking rates for conferences and conventions, how some cities were up, some were down. And the idea, to be honest, it hadn't twigged with me that conferences rotate. Of course they do. Which begs the question then, what can we do to make sure that we get into the rotation? And then one of the slides near the end of your presentation where you indicated your takeaway from the feasibility study was that there is no collaborative destination marketing plan that exists between the Nanaimo Tourism, VICC, and local partners. And to me, that's just a crucial piece that needs to be really focused on so that we can make efforts to get into more rotations and attract more business to the city and more conferences to VICC. Do you have any further comment that you could offer to that?
I completely agree with you. We are in the rotation portion of some conferences. We do need a nice marriage between a campaign collaborative endeavor with the local stakeholders, tourism and hoteliers, so that we can actually further emphasize the region. We always sell the region when we go to different trade shows and events and so forth, but it would be very beneficial, I think, that if all three entities were working towards something that was fairly large and had sort of strategies and a timeline to return on that investment. I think that's absolutely necessary.
Just if I may, a quick follow-up, Sharon. I know last year the AVICC held their conference here, and the feedback that I heard was extremely positive to the point where they were talking about, wow, we should come back here every second year. And in effect, get in the rotation, have Nanaimo in our rotation. And so the more we can do to get people here for the first time, to see what we have to offer, it's just going to help so much. So
They happen to have more than just us on the rotations, about 4 different communities at this point. So we are actually in the rotation, but it's one of those conferences where we actually have to spend money to court it to come. So there are certain conferences that do that, particularly municipal government conferences where we have to actually make an investment to bring them here. And so, of course, when we are at the point of bidding, they absolutely would love to come to the Nanaimo. They've been before. So it's always a positive thing when we can get commitment for those dollars.
thanks very much.
Councilor Yocum, Councilor White.
Thanks, Lisa. So the shortfall of $1 million from the day-to-day stuff, did that include the 1.4 million from the city?
The 1.4 million?
That the city gives to the conference center? Anything I've seen out there?
No, we receive, our annual deficit is 1.1 or less on a regular basis. We try to keep it under a certain.
Okay, I don't think I'm clear.
But I think one year, in 2014, we actually moved up in costs.
Okay, what does the city contribute each year to the conference center? Nothing?
The debt, you were talking about the debt?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's generally about $1 million a year.
So that $1 million a year is on top of that $1 million investment, or is it not just? So that's
What you see, what you saw today
But
are
all
the
in.
numbers, for budget for 2017, yes, that's the dollar, the full year deficit.
And somewhere in there was the mortgage payment.
No,
Well,
it's not.
we,
That's
So I'm
nothing.
being misled here, and I want to know the total. I don't care how it's all
We wouldn't
actual.
have that information, we don't take care of that portion.
So Victor, what's that? Help me out here. You know where I'm going with this?
Chair, through the chair, before I answer you, the whole purpose of bringing Denise forward was to provide you information to take away so we can drill down further. The question you're asking, there's 2 pieces to it.
Yeah.
So what she's speaking to is the deficit. You saw $1 million deficit in one of her slides that the city makes bore with the ICC. That's from an operational side. The mortgage is paid by the city, and that's a totally different number. And the number is in our slides, and I don't know what it is. We can provide you that number.
Okay, so to follow up, Victor, to follow up, whatever the number is, wouldn't they be responsible for that as well since they're running the roost? Or should be?
That's my comment. That's a different conversation.
Okay.
Where we need to deal with the contracts. That's another
Okay.
conversation.
So I know this is not
May I
just.
just try to help here? Debt retirement is an annual 2-point-some odd million dollars, 2.2, 2.3, 2.4, whatever that number is. Our annual operating deficit has ranged between 1 million to 1.4, 1.2, so we operate at an annual capital and operating deficit, if you will, of $3.2 million.
So just to wrap up, and I get that, I get it. So I don't see, this isn't you, because you're the contract viewer, but I don't see an action plan on that $1 million. Like, it's like, oh, it's $1 million debt, and man, but then we get this number out there that insane. I seen like, did I see $50 million or something that's in the conference center bringing into the city and the region?
That's economic impact from the delegates that come to this region.
It's a large number. Is that
Yes.
fact-based? Because it was coming from that report. I
Yeah.
pressed it.
But it's actually coming from our numbers, from our system. And at the end of the day, as indicated in the report, each person did come, they did pay, they were invoiced, and they are part of all of the conference's registration folios. So their spend is actually 2010's number. We had VIU come in and do an actual survey.
Okay.
And that's the value of each spend.
So the flip side of the coin is then saying, unfortunately, it's $1 million. But in hindsight, or on a positive note, that $1 million brings in $49 million is to the city.
Yes, sir.
Stores, B-grills, coffee shops.
Yes, sir.
That's the flip side of the conversation.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
If I may, Tracy, did you want to?
I just sort of, because we have limited time, you know how we tackled NEDC and the amount of money that's going towards there? So the next phase of this accountability and efficiencies exercise is to work with VICC on shared space, because there's an overlap on administrative and office costs between the two organizations and three organizations. So we're looking at reducing that subsidy of $1 million a year to something less, and targeting the money to be used for destination marketing, conference marketing, and looking at ways of changing the operating arrangement between the city and VICC. So this is the first step, and now we'll go away and start having the same type of conversation that we're having with NBC with VICC.
Thanks, Denise. Should we be more competitive in local markets? I have a big concern when the hoteliers come to us and tell us that our tax money isn't going to the VICC. No, I'm not going to touch it. That bothers me when they're not even willing to discuss that option. So should we compete against them?
Well, I mean, there's the devil on both sides, right? And at the end of the day,
I had to bring it up.
thank you. This has actually been something that's happened since well before opening.
Yeah.
And I understand, there is this concern where the idea that our business will be competitive with their meeting space business was always the internal monologue for some of these hoteliers. But at the same time, we need their guest rooms. And so ultimately, we worked in harmony as best that we can with this situation in order to obtain those rooms, to bring those conferences here, because that's our true mandate. But that's the question when I put the scales up, is do we do that? Do we compete to the point of, let's see where this goes, or do we actually facilitate our mandate, work together as a cohesive environment with the stakeholders that can make that happen, including the hoteliers? And I think that would be the right step and the most positive way of making this beneficial.
The rationale of the hoteliers is that the city is putting millions of dollars to destination marketing for the conference. And that's sufficient taxpayer money is being used there. This other pot of money of $500,000 should be used for additional tourist activities. I think there's a significant investment, I think close to $4 million or more in the last 5 years to get destination marketing for the conference. So that's kind of the rationale for them saying the tax isn't available for that, because they're going to be putting yet another $500,000 a year towards the same thing. So that all the money is being spent on one thing, and we don't have that thing.
But if we don't have this conference center, then the hoteliers, we would not need to spend that money on destination marketing, and they'd be on their own for their own purposes, and they would have to use their tax money for that marketing. It bothers me that I don't want to be in the hotel business. I don't want to be in the conference business. We have it. They should be doing their own. I get that we should attract tourists, but when they're collecting a tax money for their purposes, it bothers me that we're doing their work for them too, and they're not helping us. It's a one-way street. We're helping them. We're helping them. They're not helping us back. They collected a tax. They're going to use it for their own discretion, where I don't see why the VICC isn't part of it. We could do a lot of great things, and if people are coming towards it, though, they're not going to support anything that happens to the VICC. It is, in that case, is bothersome to me. It's not a collaborative working relationship, and I think that's where I want to get to is it's just not fair. We're trying to be fair. We're trying to not to compete with them, and it's just not fair the way I see it at face value. So that's my biggest concern.
If I might, as chairman, recommendation and council point that you ask this committee to invite the NHA or the National Hospitality Association to come to a meeting just like this to address your concerns straight on and hear from their perspective.
Well, they
So
said they couldn't sell. That was what they told us.
I'm just making a strong
Yeah.
suggestion that if you have concerns about the monies that they collect and how it's invested, we bring them here to address this committee. Is there any other first speakers? Then I have Councillor Tipp and then Mayor McKay. And we, please, if we could, try to wrap this up in the next 3 or 4 or 5 minutes. This portion.
I'm going after him now. But the hotel destination marketing has been on the books for decades. We're spending $900,000 a year, and obviously, no one's talking to each other. And if you want to now separate out the hotel and go competitive against them, I think you have your mind on it. That's my view. Because they have been spending. They're at 70%, I think, vacancy rates. They make up 70%. They're only vacant 30% of the time, they say. They're making their money. They're paying taxes for decades. They're keeping people, all the business people coming to town are staying in those hotels. And so from my perspective, versus going after the hoteliers, I'd say get their butts in gear, all of them, and get destination marketing. Who didn't do destination marketing for the years? I sat here and watched $100,000 a month go out to a hotelier and $900,000 go to all of our spending, and we've got nothing for it. So that bothers me more than the hoteliers saying we don't want to give up more money to this because they haven't seen the benefit. And they do benefit our community. Every tourist that's come through here for 25, 30 years has stayed in or campsites. So from my perspective, maybe there's too many experts. And each company and division and silo is hiring its experts and getting their opinions, and then the multipliers, like you're wondering about multipliers, I don't trust the multipliers. I go to conventions, I don't spend that much money, but I'm kind of a cheapskate. Other people might spend way more than me, but I just don't see those facts and figures. And I didn't mean to tell you. I shouldn't have done that. So I don't spend that much money, but for me, we need to work together to make this work. Yes, it's there. Yes, it's there. It's cost $100 million now. And to say that it's bringing in $1 million or $2 million or $4 million a year, we've spent $100 million. And 100 people could have been millionaires. And they were spending. So from my point of view,
Chair, do you have any questions for the presentation? Terrific. And if we don't have questions, I'd like to receive the delegation.
Travel was not an issue. You said in some of this. You said on the slide it was where you mentioned it, but you said travel was not an issue because people with reason, we book our own travel, we go to hotels. I stayed in Dartmouth for a Halifax convention, went across a beautiful little boat. So you did say that, but it hasn't been up to this point.
It's not an issue per se, no. We're definitely getting interest from mainland or BC.
No, I'm talking travel to and from the hotel nights. People pick their own, you said that.
No, in terms, for lost business, those hotels, those clients definitely want something attached to bill of yes. But for what we've been able to achieve and the hard sell that we've made with our conferences, we absolutely do sell in this region to our hotels.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your presentation, by the way. You talk about conference courting, ABICC. You're expected as the host community to support that. So, question is, where do other communities get their conference courting money? Does it come out of the city budget? Does it come out of the tax, the hotel tax revenue?
Yes.
Comes out of the hotel tax.
A number of communities do definitely have it, so it is coming out of that particular environment. But I mean, each municipality is different. But yes, generally hotels contribute a percentage towards that very thing. It brings in the conference that
Great. So my next question is, other conference centers, Penticton, Kelowna, Victoria, do they garner revenue stream? New Westminster is another one. Do they garner revenue stream from the parking below the building?
Victoria does, absolutely. So,
New Westminster does.
Yeah, I've yet to connect with that individual. I have made some calls, but it must be not.
I've been following the Apple Center very closely.
Yeah.
And to 500, roughly 500 to 600 delegates. There's a 10-story office building on top of it. They ran about a $500,000 deficit last year. However, they're looking forward to increased fortune, particularly when the building becomes occupied. Because of course, they will garner the parking revenue.
Yeah,
Notwithstanding the fact that they sold the airspace.
And Victoria also has lease space that they require revenues from as well.
Thank you very much.
Is there any other questions? I just have a couple, if I may, if you will indulge me, please. And a comment to staff. I think that our city's contribution in terms of rent is plus or minus $100,000. And if we could just have that confirmed so that we know, because I heard $37,500 to $40,000 number. So if we could please confirm that. Denise, on one of your slides, you indicated delegate days versus market 2016 to 17. Our variance is 4,400. Fewer delegate days for 2017 forecast.
Yes.
Thank you. And you also alluded in one of your slides, or a comment maybe on a slide, about percentage fee increase on AV rentals and food and beverage.
Yes.
I think it's 31% or something, 18% for another. Where does that revenue stream go? Where does that land? Where does that end up?
To the bottom line. So the percentage of 17% on food that we receive as a commission structure is to the VICC budget, to the one I just discussed. Same with beverage, same with AV. Those percentages are toward revenue streams. Yes.
So
the remainder goes back to the contractor, and they then have their own P&Ls and general budgets for those departments.
I'm just unclear on what the remainder means. So if there's a
So,
flat fee
for
plus a
example,
percentage.
yeah, so 100% for every $100, 86 cents goes to the food contractor. 83 cents goes back to the food contractor. 17 cents comes to the VICC. Just to note on that, Victoria's commission structure with the Empress is 5%.
So we'll look into that.
Thank you. Thank you. May I have a motion to receive?
Motion to receive.
Second. Moved by Mayor McKay, seconded by Councilor Cook. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Apologies.
The next item, is this meeting scheduled to end at a specific time or ideally or?
Scheduled to end at noon.
At noon? Okay, thank you.
We may recommend that long because you've got your budget in the morning.
So we have 3 items and then the presentation. So we would care to stay in this order?
Sure.
Thank you.
The items are straightforward, so we should be able to do 4 minutes on them.
Right. So who's introducing 7A? It is the annual financial audit, that's to inform of the important dates pertaining to the 2016 annual financial audit. Is that to you, Mr. Chairman?
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of the report is basically to inform Council of the dates where the audit is going to be done. The interim is coming up November 8 to 10, and year end is coming up March 6 to 17, after which you will receive your audited financial statements. Thank you.
Any questions on the report and presentation? There being none, the motion to receive. Move Councillor Hahn, second Councillor Thorpe. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. That's and if you're committed to making sure that they all move this smoothly, we'll go to 7B. Harbourfront Parkade debt retirement.
Thank you. We spoke about this when we went through the budget last year, that we had the debt for the parquet that was coming up for renewal, and we, as staff, are recommending that we pay this out so we save the city a little bit of interest. And so the recommendation is that the committee recommends council approve the payout for the Harbour Parquet loan for the full amount of $810,000, and funding for this would come out of our reserves. The value for us is that we are not earning as much money on interest on our own investments compared to the interest we pay on the debt. So that differentiation is the value that we are proposing. We take advantage of. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Is this a question, Jerry, or is this a motion?
Question?
Would you care to make a motion and then have questions?
Yeah. I move the staff recommendation.
Moved by Councilor Thomas, second by Councilor Thorpe. Now it's on the table. If we could,
Thank you. So when we pay this off from reserves, this is general reserves we're talking about, right?
Correct.
So, but when we were making these payments for this infrastructure, where was that in the item line? Was that in the parking structure, or was that still in general reserves that we were making these monthly payments for this infrastructure? Where was this renewal money coming from? Is my question.
Wasn't it parking reserves, is that your question?
Well, where was the monthly payments coming from?
So it's, the payments are always reported as an expense as part of parking, but the repayment of the loan, we actually funded it from the parking reserves. How money gets into the parking reserves is we collect money for parking fees, and whatever excess of that we have over and above over our annual parking expenses, we put into a reserve. It comes back out again.
Follow up. So I would really like to see that this $810,000 come out of parking reserves, even if we have to move money into reserves, because that is a lot cleaner for the public to realize that this is a parking issue. This came from parking reserves and not a general reserve, because I don't want it to come out of a general pot when it should be correctly allocated to parking for a parking issue. If that seems to make sense. Does that make sense?
Okay, so that's an accounting question, and we can make that work. All we're looking at, when we look at these things, we don't look at them in isolation per se. We look at them as what's the benefit for the single taxpayer who has to deal with this. And if we save money here, it impacts something else over here. So from an accounting perspective, we can make that work.
Just looks clean. Thank you.
Any other questions?
So what was the annual payment?
So I'm thinking Appendix A, page 12. Unfortunately, that speaks of the future. Do you have the underpayments from the past? We'll get that number first.
So if I understand correctly, our savings is the difference between what our interest rate we're paying and the interest rate we're receiving on the money. We keep it in the bank, invested, and it's that difference. Thank you. And we're at what 1.2 or 2.2% on our $800,000 loan.
Okay, so
annualized.
So we earning 1.38% on interest from borrowings. So if you look at Appendix A, it shows you the interest rates that each of the three options would provide. I thought we have the number for payments. 185,000.
Great, thank you.
Okay, is everybody satisfied? We're good?
So I wonder if I could. Would it be appropriate this time, Mr. Chair, to make the request that a report on the parking revenue stream, revenue and expense stream, come forward to this committee? I have very, very strong feelings about the fact that all the parking revenue that is generated by the BICC is not going to the operating costs of the BICC, but instead goes into general revenue. And for example, on a convocation day at BIU Convocation Day, you cannot get parking. It's almost impossible to get parking in any one of the underground spots, either Harbourfront or under the BICC. And that's directly related to an event at the BICC, yet there's no recognition of that contribution. And my recommendation, or at least where I'd like to go, is that everything under that half of the building be dedicated to revenue go to the BICC operating.
I would like to suggest that it be part of the BICC when we explore its cost structure and possibilities for revenue generation, that the council will have those options put in front of them. And then this is separate and distinct from that, but it's a good line of inquiry we need to take.
If I could just follow, I think it's good. That's a good way of going. I just want staff to know where I'm coming from so they can keep that on their radar for that discussion.
I think it's a very valid point. We do have a motion on the floor. We are reviewing parking fees as well in all of our parking lots, and how we determine where the revenues go, whether it's parking revenues or otherwise, or against operating or portions thereof, I think is a really good thought. But at this point in time, is October the 31st a sensitive date in which to confirm that we would proceed with this debt retirement? Because if we don't meet again for 2 more weeks or 3 or whatever it is, then we might find ourselves in an expiration, and then we are in the position to be able to retire this debt. I'm not sure. I'm just asking that.
So we have a date to meet. So we look for that direction. I think the revenue parking conversation is separate and distinct, and we'll address it as part of VIU. We address it as part of the user fee charges review, and that's a separate report we can bring to this council. So I prefer we dealt with this direction so we can meet the deadline.
Thank you. Does that satisfy?
Yeah, this is a recommendation to council, what we're doing today.
Yes, and so we'll have to adopt this in 2 weeks from now on the Monday night. Right. So I don't think we'd have the time if we, so Councillor Kipling, do you want to?
No.
Thank you. Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you.
I'd like to say on the parking issue, the history of the parking issue, when they built the theater and where the library is, we built an extra 150 spaces. There was 150 in the ground. We paid over $40,000 a site. And what the council today thought, that this was money put out by the city, so that revenue should come back to the city. And that all the businesses above it that rent air parcels and airspace, that revenue comes to the city. We benefit from those events, and that's part of the history I think staff needs to remember too. When we built the parking space for the VICC, it was thought that we would give the revenue, but no, because the city built the building into that, we kept some revenue, and that revenue could still be steered towards the VICC, but I would suggest that it comes through the city to show us another subsidy by the taxpayers to that building. And I think that's clear marketing strategy for me would be to show where the money comes from. So the history of that parking is interesting.
And I think it's important to also recognize that we do pay for the security here we have, and we do pay for the repair and maintenance in the parking garage as well as.
Well, I've always had concerns about making money with false revenues, I would say, or line item revenues that move. I've always had a concern about it. It look like they're making money. Say it goes through one agency as a donation and then it gets spent on something else. I have my problems with that.
I think points all taken. Thank you. So now we have, Victor's gone though, so I allowed that. Oh, you're over there. I heard that, I had my head down, I heard the door closed, I saw that you were there. You sneaky little guy. Wow, how did you do that? Penn and Teller right here. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we have 30 minutes to do a quick overview of the budget. The intention today was not to debate the budget per se, but to just on the table to start a conversation. We're going to have review meetings that you see from the timelines. What we would ask for probably for the last 10 or so minutes is council to, is the council to say this is what we would like to see as we go on in this discussion.
Receive the report.
Thank you.
Seconded. First of all, read our agendas, right?
So I've just spoken to the timelines. All we're asking for is we'll have meetings every month until December, so we can discuss and we have specific meetings to receive reports as you did today from our agencies, VICC, NEDC, and we'll have a conversation with DMPIA as well. We'll also have a discussion in November on water and sewer budgets, specifically for that meeting. We'll come back in December and talk about the general budget, and then look at probably a provisional budget at that time. So that's the timeline. We're hoping we'll do what we did last year, which was to have a provisional budget in December and then still work on it and finalize that in the new year. A couple of big reports that are still to come to council in Q1 of next year that impact the long-term outlook for our finances. The sewer infrastructure review capacity report, asset management update, and the DCC update. And we mentioned this to you yesterday at the meeting. And then we have the traditional assignments to deal with the property tax bylaw and the final financial plan. So, in a nutshell, what you are receiving today is a result of a number of planning processes. So we have short-term financial planning, which really is your year-to-year budget, which runs into your 5-year plan. And we have a 10 to 20-year plan, just for context. As you go through this discussion and as you listen to us speak, what's important is what is in the immediate future. What's in the long term provides you a context. It's based on what we know today, which might actually change as time and information becomes clearer. But it helps us to look at the future from what could be and what we need to prepare for as we go forward. Deborah is going to speak to you on the actual 2017-2021 budget, and I'll give you a quick 1-minute overview of the long-term financial overview for just for context. So we have a 20-year capital plan, and the code's version of what we see in the future is that we have some shortfalls. And the shortfalls in the long term are really driven by growth. And we are trying to address our growth impact on our budget through DCCs, and that exercise is ongoing now. We met internally as staff to try and look at other options of how do we address the impact of growth other than through DCCs, so we can quicken some of the capacity issues that come through that process. And we have to overlay that on the understanding that we basically have a lot of old infrastructure that needs to be dealt with. And those conversations will be answered through the big reports that are coming to you in Q1 of 2017. Obviously, that's the GCC update, the user fees update, especially with the utilities, to see if there's a way to impact our user fees to take care of capacity, and then asset management. So in short, that's the big picture before we get into the actual 2017-2021 financial plan.
Thank you. Is there any questions for Mr. Mayor before we turn the floor?
DCCs, are 25% assessed factor still in place?
In the current DCCs, yes, we may have, and I think we have options to deal with in the updated. And that's a conversation we have in Q1.
And we are reviewing.
Yes.
Jim, because Jim will know the answer. All those apartments we approved last night, well, all those apartments, this is really dumb, I should know this by now. It's part of my dumbness at times. All those apartments we approved, do they pay DCs for each of those doors?
They have to be based on the current DCC.
Yes. So all those units will be paid.
Okay.
Checking.
Or they pay per meter cost on multiple housing units?
There's a formula.
We should increase that.
Yes, we should.
Yeah.
I
think the market can bear.
Thank you. So Deborah, if Deborah's up, we have 19 minutes.
Okay, so first of all, we'll just quickly look at the strategic priorities and initiatives, and we'll get into Ariel if you have a question. First, Council's update identified 5 projects and 2 initiatives. So in the draft 2017-2021 financial plan, we have these projects in the budget. For the Port Drive South Downtown Waterfront, we have a study underway. We have the Wellcox access for $6.3 million. A study is underway looking at options and costs. Bedlam Park Facilities Master Plan, we don't have anything in the draft plan at this point. We have, for the event center, we have a feasibility study that's being undertaken this year. Waterfront Walkway is, we have the Nanaimo Yacht Club waterfront walkway there. And we have the Georgia Avenue Greenway.
What's
Yes.
that?
It's a bridge.
Sorry, that's just not the yacht club piece, right? For 1.4, I thought we were connecting the whole thing. So that's kind of not just, I don't want people to think that we're putting a walkway in front of the yacht club for 1.4 million.
Or did you want to say what the scope of the contract is?
Right now, for that,
Or, sorry.
right now, for the plan right now, and just these changes, that's the project is for the
It's just that section.
Well, you're going to be having a briefing session that's going to talk about all the different segments of it and what things you can pull up that might be cost effective, and there will be more than just that one as an option. That's just as far as we've gotten so far. There's still more work to do.
Thank you. Bring it back.
Okay, the two initiatives. One initiative was the poverty reduction affordable housing. We still have the annual contributions of $165,000 going into that housing legacy reserve. The reserve right now has a balance of $2.7 million. So we have money there to move things ahead. 2017 projects for this is the developing the affordable housing strategy and the social wellness strategy. That's in the 2017 plan. Property acquisition was the second initiative. At this point, we still have that annual budget for $600,000.
May I just ask, what is it, 600,000, but what is in our property acquisition plan now?
Current balance 1.4 million.
So with the 600 from 2016, it will be 2 million?
If we haven't spent it, have we spent it? We haven't spent it, so yes, it will be.
Okay, and then we've also sold properties. So we've sold the SPCA site, we've sold Bowen Road on Meredith, we've sold...
Purchase reserve? Yeah. There's a second reserve, there's two property sales reserves, so actually we have two reserves.
Have you seen stop selling stuff for $1 and there'll be more?
You're not supposed to say that.
I think you're supposed to say that.
Second.
I don't quite understand. We have two property, as far as I'm concerned, when we sell something, the money's got to get put into something. So it doesn't go in, so if we sell property, it doesn't go into the property acquisition reserve fund after we've sold?
We have two reserves. One of them is the property acquisition reserve, which is not a statutory reserve, and we have a property property, which is a stat reserve. And when we sell a property, we put it in that reserve.
And how much is in that reserve, please?
Projected balance is about
921,000.
So we haven't received the monies for the SPCA property or the Meredith Road property, then I have to assume, because...
That's correct. The SPCA property, for example, is scheduled to close middle December. So we would receive those funds at that.
Thank you.
So neither one of those two balances I told you reflect those sales.
Thank you. What can we use that money for then? It's a statutory reserve.
The statutory reserve, we'd have to use it for purchasing property. And this one here is not a stat reserve, so you council has discretion about what it's going to use.
Yeah, okay. Just quickly, so where would, down the road, Dale's presentation last night, that chunk of land is potential development up by the old water, would that fall into this X? The reserve, not acquisition, but the reserve if we sold it or developed it?
Well, I assume so, because the school board property transfer, if there was money involved, would have gone into the statutory property acquisition reserve fund.
Sales.
So I would make that assumption that I would need staff to confirm.
So that's correct. So the statutory piece is you sold property, you can only use it to buy property. That's the statutory thing. That's the limitation you have. This one is discretionary. As much as you say this is property acquisition, you could redesignate this for anything else. You have that power, but you don't have power to redesignate statutory.
So the specific reference that Councilor Yoko was making reference to is the GNWD properties. If we were to sell a portion of that, those monies would go into the statutory.
It would be statutory, it wouldn't be discretionary?
Yeah, it would be the statutory.
Buy more stuff. Or get creative.
No.
Thank you. Any other questions on this specific topic?
Well, we don't have much in our housing reserve. We couldn't build half of a spillway. But we got to put more money into land acquisition. We spend more on debt than we do on land acquisition.
Continue, please.
Okay, so just looking at So just looking at the draft 5-year plan, the 2017 plan, these are the projected property tax increases. So what I've done here is compared it to years 2 to 5 in the current 5-year plan. So what we're looking at right now for 2017 is 2.4% increase for 2017. That includes 1% for increase for the contribution to the asset management reserve. So then going further out, the projected increases are less. Of course, we don't have that 1% increase to asset management reserve.
Thank you, and it's reasonable to assume that we don't have the amount that we collect on behalf of the regional district, right?
No, we don't.
We can make an estimate what that is.
We get it in March, actually. This is a 10-year property tax history. So what we've done here is these are the property tax increases starting in 2008, which was 3.5%. The various increases, 2016 being 0, and you got 2.4%. The average increase is 2.2 over 10 years. And of course, 2013 to 2017 includes that 1% increased contribution to asset management. 2017 revenues. So total revenues is $165 million. This provides funding for our annual operating and maintenance budgets. That's where we deliver our day-to-day services. It provides funding for projects, just over $7 million, and contributions to our infrastructure renewal reserves. So that's those asset management reserves, equipment replacement, facility replacement, those reserves. 2017 operating budget. So this is just looking at operating, not the projects. The annual operating budget for 2017 is $133 million. There's a net increase of $2.2 million. The key budget drivers for 2017. We have that increased contribution to the asset management reserve for $964,000. We have 2 new positions. We have an increase for the IAFF contract. We've made a provision for increases to management and QP contracts. QP contract expires at the end of this year. We have an increase of $854,000 for the RCMP contract. We've reduced the snow and ice control budget by $200,000. We've reduced it from 600 to 400. 400 is still higher than the 3-year average, and we have a snow and ice control reserve available if we run into a problem. We also, at this point in the draft budget, start the new debt for the project Mobile Fox Access. So that's an increase of 3.3. At this point, we're estimating 1.2 in additional revenues from growth, so that the net increase in our budget is 2.2 million. Here we have this is a project summary for the next 5 years, and we've broken it down the same way we did last year, basically by the different infrastructure programs, and you can see how it changes year to year. The total is $203 million over the next 5, $44 million in 2017. Yes?
Any questions? The light green portion, I'm just trying to quickly go through it, transportation infrastructure program. And the only reason it caught my attention is because it's big. Can you help me understand what the transportation infrastructure program dollars relate to?
So it's going to include road rehab. It's also going to include some new DCC roads, and we're talking about what the big one is in 2018.
Lindley Roundabout at Lindley Valley. The Nelson Rutherford Roundabout is in next year for $2 million.
Yes.
What about the bridge?
Oh,
Ashton Street
that
Bridge.
is one of the big projects. Yes, it is.
Is that in
and it's
2018?
actually in 2018.
No,
It's actually
Ashton is in
2017.
Wilcox Access is 28.
That's the big job. Yeah. Okay.
Big bridges.
Thank you.
So in the key projects in this plan, this is $179 million for infrastructure renewal and for growth too. This is upgrades due to growth as well. We have $6.9 million for the Port Theater expansion, and that's in addition to the money we budgeted this year. The project has not started yet. $2.6 million for the Harewood Centennial Park multi-use facility. 8 million for new pedestrian, cycling, and transit amenities, including the Georgia Greenway, which is a pedestrian and cycling bridge, I understand. $200,000 to develop the affordable housing and poverty reduction strategy, and $500,000 over the next 5 years for public art. Yes.
Councillor Hunt.
Thank you. Why are we adding $6.9 million to the Port Theatre when we already added 5.7?
5.7 is in year 1 of the project, 6.9 is in year 2. The total is the 11, whatever that adds up to.
Well, I thought they were supposed to raise the money.
Okay, so that's the expenditures part of it. The funding piece of it, that's a really good question. Up till, including in the current 2016 plan, we've used funding 100% from grants and private contributions. So after council's direction about or support of the project, we have changed the funding to borrowing for 4.4, I think, or 4.6, I think. 4.6 for to support this project once it gets voted. But the total cost is over $11 million at this point in the draft plan. 4.6 million would be borrowing done by the city. The rest of it would be through grants and private contributions at this point.
But they are supposed to get that.
Yes.
If they raise more, you cut back on the 4 point.
But why are we listing 6.9 when we only... It's up to them, it doesn't...
Mr. Mayor.
So the project, the building is ours. So the project is ours. So what she's showing are the costs. So there's a revenue piece as to who's going to raise which part, and that's still remaining intact. And we can easily extract and say, oh, let's just show our portion. If that helps council to deal with what we're responsible for, that's a presentation. We can do that. What I wanted to address quickly was when we spoke about this last time, we were going to designate part of our grant to that project. Now, the problem with that is that then you run into rules, they call them stacking rules between feds and where they say, well, we gave you this money, so you can't access this because you already have it there. So if we went with debt, that enhances the chances of getting the grants. That's the clarification I wanted to make.
Does that increase our budget though? So does that $6.9 million increase, does that show up on our 2.4% increase? So if we took that $6.9 million out of our budget.
Debt repayment. So the debt repayment. So the 6.9 million doesn't, it's the debt repayment, the 4.6, that when that debt starts, that does increase the budget.
Which is the portion the city is responsible for or committed to.
Okay, so this 2.4% for 2017, even if we, that 6.9 million does not affect this 2.4.
So two different things. One thing is what's the commitment, the expenditure commitment, and then the other piece is how do we fund it, right? That's the other side of it. So 6.9 is the second part of the funding or the expenditure part of it, and then how do we fund it? 4.6 from borrowing, and repayment of that does put pressure on property taxes, yes, and the rest will be grants and private contributions.
Okay, well, I like to discuss that more.
Yeah.
Okay.
I share similar concerns as Councilor Hahn as it relates to how we discussed to get to this place.
So what we'll commit to do at our next meeting is to bring one slide where we talk about the cost, the revenue, who is responsible for what part, what's the impact to the city as a compensation case.
Thank you. Mayor McKay.
One of the things that's bothered me for some time is the fact that we take our gaming money and put it into general revenue. Communities all across the province put that money into legacy projects. And you see them advertised on TV. Fort St. John being one, Richmond being another. Of the $150 million capital cost of the Oval, 5 years after the Olympics, it was paid off. Of that $150 million, $50 million of it came directly from gaming funds. I have said for some time that I would propose that we take $920,000 per year for 5 years out of our gaming contributions. It's money from the sky. It's not tax money. By going into debt, we're fooling ourselves because we're borrowing for a project when in fact there's money coming from the sky that we could be using for this legacy project. So if we did 5 years, we wouldn't have to go to a referendum for the borrowing because there would be no borrowing. We may be able to work from other funds where we've done before, where we've borrowed from reserves, knowing that we've got the revenue stream coming in. But I would propose that we take $920,000 a year for 5 years from our gaming funds and put it towards the Port Theatre, our contribution, and it would be there's your 4.6 million without taxpayer money.
I don't disagree with you, Mayor McKay, and there's considerable amount of free monies that we have that flow through our books that we may wish to entertain alternative places for it to be expended. And that would be a good topic, I think, for our next meeting as well, to add to the other topic that we identified, the Port Theatre being one, so I appreciate that. Ms. Sammer, you wanted to speak?
When we were going through this with staff, what's the reality that that 8.8 million is going to be raised and trigger the 4.4 million in the next 5 years? I would sort of express some concern about reflecting that in our tax rate, but it's still a commitment that we've done, so.
Thank you. And we're closing in on the witching hour, so.
Okay, next slide.
I have to go out to catch Terry, I have to go to a funeral. Thank you very much. Excellent meeting.
Okay, super quick. Sewer projects, DCCS discussed, we have a challenge there and we're looking at it. Here's just a breakdown of the funding sources for projects. We are using reserves more. We're using reserves that we tended to use for larger scale projects. We're using for smaller projects. General capital reserve we're going to use for the field lights, a new excavator, the community works fund we're using for Harewood Centennial, implementing the cycling amenities for the transportation master plan, and the Greenway Avenue, Orange Avenue, sorry.
I'm sorry, because I don't know how far we're going to get, but I have to, could you just go back, please? Roxman Mariner Field Lights, 389. We committed to match at 150 or 175. So our portion is half that, unless we're doing more lights than I understood that we were doing.
They got the money from.
Yeah.
We committed to is it 150 or 175? 150. We didn't commit 389.
Initially, if I could, so initially, the group came in with asking 175, with 150 coming from the Blue Jays, if they got the Blue Jay grant, which they secured. Their costing, in the time I did the report, we weren't quite sure what the cost would be. The worst case scenario is that dollar there. We're working with baseball now on other in-kind contributions that they'll
Our
contribute.
portion is 389?
Right. Baseball's coming back still with their what in-kind contributions they're going to show, which could lower that substantially. But they just secured the 150 a few weeks ago. So now we're working on what they're going to secure without other in-kind contributions.
And I wish not to get into a debate at this hour, but we were asked to match a certain amount, and we did. And it was, we never discussed 300 or 389 or 369 or 299, or it was always, we will match whatever they get from, and the other portions that they need, if there's a shortcoming with Blue Jays money and our contribution, they'll make it up, not us.
So if I could, similar to other projects, we're trying to show the true cost of the project as we go into it, just like the mention of other projects. Right now, that is the true cost of the project. We have to find that those other costs, and we're working with the groups to find that what they're gonna promise to find some in-kind contributions.
So I'll just ask, Mayor, did you have your hand up?
Yes, forgive my naivety, when we refer to the Soroxman Mariner field lights, are we referring to the field where the Rotary House is?
That's right.
Okay,
Yes.
great, thank you.
Bearing in mind, there might be.
And Mr. Mayor, did you want to address that?
Yes, all I wanted to say was we will follow up on this project. If we made a commitment of 175, that's kind of like the limit, that's the line that council drew. And so we'll make a follow-up as to, yes, that's the true cost of the project, but who's going to make up the difference? Because the appearance of showing it this way means you are now committed more than 175, and that's not your intent, so we will look into it.
I didn't understand that, but then, all right, yeah.
Thank you. So, Richard, if they got the 150, we minus 150 from that number, or are we adding 150 on top of that number?
Adding 150 to top of that number. So if council remember, when they came as a delegation, I did a report, they came up with their numbers. In my report, I indicated I wasn't 100% comfortable with their true costs of what they were proposing. So I said, this is, if they get the grant, we'll have to come back to council with an updated project. They just got the grant a few weeks ago. We're still working with them to come with a report of an updated costs and issues with it. So it's exciting that they got 150 from Blue Jays, but it is definitely a little more expensive than they initially presented to council. And I remember at the time it was not comfortable with the cost that they provided. And that we're definitely showing worst case of the lighting costs there, but we need to going into a project, we can't go in lowballing it. We have to make sure we show the cost as contingencies. But we will be coming back to council with a report on that specific project.
This line item to me is similar to the Port Theater. It says 6.9, we said it was 4.2 or 4.4. That's our contribution, regardless of how much it costs. Because every year the price is going to go up. Every 6 months the price is going up. So we didn't pass those motions with an increase at a percentile year over year. It was, this is the amount, good luck. And this is what's happened to the Port Theater. They haven't been able to raise their monies to match, for us to match what we said we would do, regardless of how much the end price is. We're fixed. That's what I understand.
Thank you. This is, I'm guilty of this as well, but this is one of the issues and problems in governance where whatever committee it goes under, Tracy, where when we, and I'm part of it as well, when we do sort of need good motions, but maybe reactionary motions, because there's a good presentation in front of us. Here's a perfect example where we should think about maybe hearing it, as awesome as it is, and getting all the facts here, like in this case. But nonetheless, on the fourth bullet down, the new excavator. Is it wise to buy a new excavator for some fact? Because I got friends that lease these things all the time at the stores, and I'm not promoting my friends, but because they're worthless after a job, you can't sell them. And leasing would be a better route to go. And it's not. I don't know. I just want to throw it out there because I know excavators a little bit, and jobs are beat up and it's worthless. Anyways, I'm not an expert, but anyways, thanks.
Victor, last word, and we are at 12:05. So I'm just wondering, go ahead.
What I would suggest through the chair is on our next meeting, we would come back and have a fulsome discussion on capital projects, because that's where most of the interest is, as an agenda item, so we can continue from where we are. So you have more time to discuss the individual pieces. So I'm offering as of now.
What is council's pleasure? Would you like to reset, or would you like to adjourn this meeting and then continue with the presentation? Is that what you're suggesting?
Correct.
Is that,
So moved.
Seconded by Councilor Youngman. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much.